aha moments. The cool thing is that there's a really cool story about where this came from. So for C3, whether it's us attending a training, a conference, our own, what we call Camp C3, like our retreat day, at the end of all of that, we always ask ourselves, what were your aha moments? What did you learn? What did you take away? So I mentioned that again because we really hope that over the past 2 days, there's been a couple of nuggets. Maybe it's been conversations with your peers, conversations with a vendor or whatever, but we really hope there's a couple of aha moments that you're going to take back with you. So you've also heard going beyond technology, and we actually had a brief conversation about this at dinner last night. But for us, going beyond technology not only inspired us to bring in some awesome keynotes, which we hope you really enjoyed yesterday. I know I did. But it really inspired us to reach out to some thought leaders in tech roles for a conversation that goes beyond tech and shares what their focuses are going into the next year, how they've shaped their teams or they continue to shape their teams, how they approach mentorship, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an honor and it's a privilege to welcome this panel. So Steve, I'm going to have you come up first. Steve is the CIO at 1-800-Hansons. We've got Ali, the CISO at Amway. Yes, please, round of applause, absolutely. We've got Craig, the CISO at Gordon Food Services. And then we've got Stacy, Senior Vice President at Rocket Companies. And then, of course, our fearless leader, our founder, Matthew Toth. All right, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. All right, we're going to start with some introductions on the panel so you know who we are up here. So I'll start with myself. My name is Matthew Toth. I'm the founder of C3 Technology Advisors. We are a technology consulting firm based here in the Grand Rapids area. There are 37 of us today. We're about a $55 million company, and we're growing as quickly as we can find good people. So, Stacy, go ahead.
Stacy Castor, I'm at Rocket Companies. My current focus is within Rocket Connections, Senior Vice President leading all of business operations, which includes technology. I've been in technology for over 25 years, and over the last year, I've been adding operations to it, so it's been fun and interesting.
Hi, everybody. I'm Craig James Hare. I work for Gordon Food Service, and I lead our information security and enterprise risk management function. For those of you who don't know Gordon Food Service, which I hope you do because we're here in Michigan, but we're the largest family-owned food distribution company in North America.
All right. My name is Ali Sayed. I'm the global CISO for Amway based out of West Michigan, similar to Craig. If you're not familiar with Amway, we need to have a conversation. But for context, for those traveling from abroad, we are the #1 direct selling company. We have a focus on health and wellness, so based out of West Michigan. Looking forward to the conversation.
My name is Steve York. I'm the Chief Information Officer at 1-800-Hansons. We're a private equity-owned home improvement company that operates 17 branches in 10 states.
All right, excellent. So we've got a few questions here. I expect this to be a little bit conversational, going a little bit back and forth. So try and keep it lively. So we'll start with this question. I honestly think it might be the most important one. There's a shortage of talent, especially cybersecurity, and this is a huge problem. So I'd like to talk about what your strategies are for attracting, retaining, and developing your team. So Stacy, start with you.
Well, the first part is your culture. That's what people look for, that's what they want. So I think building an innovative, inclusive culture is really #1. And outside of that is really training and benefits. So when we talk about benefits, I'm not just talking about healthcare and stuff like that, but what kind of actual training opportunities are you giving people? How are you empowering them? And you heard it yesterday about social media. You need to put things out there on social media so people want to be part of your culture and want to see things. So don't be shy and take those pictures when you have those team events and showing all that fun and showing the diversity on your team to get people to want to be there.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so attract, retain, develop, certainly all intertwined components of human resources within the organization. And for us, on the attraction side, I'd say the one thing that we're really intentional about is getting out into the community. So if you're at a cybersecurity event here in the West Michigan area, you're probably going to find somebody from our team actively participating. That creates some great networking opportunities for them, other potential candidates, I'll say, to see the quality of our employees, the program that we have, et cetera. And so when we have an opening, they have a little bit of an understanding of who they could potentially be working with. And I would add on the attraction side as well, we're really working hard to establish connections with universities. And so whether that's through internship programs or even connecting with faculty and staff to get engaged with like their capstone programs and be partners where they're reaching out to us, asking if they can engage and do projects for the organization and things for their capstone classes, and that's been really positive as well. I think on the retention and development side, those kind of go really hand in hand together. The more you develop people, the more marketable they become, and you've probably all heard the more marketable a person is, the more likely they are to stay. They want to continue to sharpen their skills and so forth, so we spend probably a disproportionate amount of investment dollars on training than other departments in our organization.
Hey, Ali, before you go, I had a quick question for you, Stacy. You talked about culture for a second. I just wanted you to expand on something because I'm curious on this because I'm stealing from part of my closing keynote. Fantastic. I need it to be shorter anyway. I like to use the word intentional when we talk about culture. So like, who owns it and how do you intentionally build that?
Oh, that's a great question. I believe that the team members own it. They're the ones that are going to tell you what they want, what they need, and you need to take a step back as a leader. One, listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use those 2 ears and listen. And then empower them to be able to do some of those things. Now, we all need to work through legal and HR, and we know some of those things that we have to do, but at the end of the day, there's a lot you can do, and you get creative. So it is really listening to what the team members' needs are and understanding how you do that, and then intentionally saying, okay, you want to do this, let's make a program for that, let's enable this, whatever that is. So that's what it is to me.
Thank you.
I was going to piggyback off what Stacy just mentioned. Fundamentally, to retain talent, it's all about culture. Culture, culture, culture. It's not easy. On the surface, it sounds easy about building an environment where the sense of belonging for an individual. But realistically, everyone in this room has a different sense of purpose. Everyone's unique and individual in that manner, to your point. So culture has to provide for the needs of that individual in your team, not necessarily it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? From a sense of belonging perspective, definitely you want to create a safe environment. So our perspective has been just that, focusing tremendously on the culture of a sense of belonging, investing in the resources, providing them with the ability to trainings, courses, resources, for them to be the best individual to be able to support us. It's kind of a give and take, right? By us investing in them, and this is where I've had conversations with other leaders who kind of go, well, you're investing so much, aren't you kind of afraid that that person's going to leave? And the trademark is, if you don't invest in that person, the chances that that person stays, do you still want them around, right? But fundamentally, it comes down to building a strong culture in your team such that even if an offer is presented, that culture anchor pulls them back. So it's not an easy thing to do, but I would second what Stacy just mentioned. Culture, culture, culture is how you retain. That becomes your brand. So from a recruitment perspective, it speaks for itself, right? It's one thing to just put out your job descriptions on a board. It's completely different to find someone within your team that through word of mouth recruits someone. That relationship back to culture is what will make you successful. So whether it be in security or any other function, building a culture where your team members feel they're being invested in is the goal.
Yeah, I would add to that, we build a lot of our own talent, right? We've got a blue-collar workforce that's really talented with hammers and saws, but when you put an opportunity in front of somebody to change their direction. We find a lot of our own candidates internally. I believe culture is key. If you don't have culture, you can pay people as well as you possibly can from a budget perspective, but they're not going to stay. They want a sense of belonging. We have a very flat organization, so I have one leader between me and my entire IT team, but I talk to them regularly. We eat lunch together regularly. I know my team. I know their spouses, their children, their extracurricular. I mean, it's important to get out of the corner office and get to know people. When I have an opening, I tell my team I have an opening, and 9 times out of 10, they bring candidates to the table, which is the best position to be in. I think the other challenge we have is, and nobody's mentioned it, so I will, partners matter in that case as well, right? So I've been doing this for a really long time. I have some partners that have been with me from the beginning. When I have a need, I can reach out through my network and talk to my partners, and you know what? They're going to recommend people that they know because they know my reputation and they know the work I do. So I think that all is a component of it, right? You have to be part of your business, and part of that is extending yourself into your own network to talk to your partners who have resources and people. And if you look at what's happened in IT over the last 12 months, massive reductions and downsizing. That just created a flood of talent back into the market. And so good people will connect good people with opportunities.
You know what I find interesting is, before I started C3, I think about culture, and I sometimes think of companies that just use this as a buzzword, and they do things that feel hollow and superficial. Like I remember having a park day, and we got all the people in Michigan and Indiana and Ohio together, and we're just all gonna go to the park one day. And we're all like, why? Like, this isn't normal. And I feel like culture is just like, in a weird way, isn't a noun, but it's just an adjective for the way you are. Mm-hmm. If you aren't who you are, then it looks and it feels superficial. So you can talk about culture, but like, if you're not doing these things, if it's just a poster on a wall, and it's not like something that is talked about in orientation and in quarterly updates and such, then there's a hollowness to it. So I don't know. I sometimes wonder if a lot of the companies out there just struggle with this. Oh, we're going to put posters everywhere, and someone might talk about it here and there, versus it being who you really are. And I feel like people can smell you out when it is that hollow thing, and it's just the poster on the wall.
100%. I mean, culture is not something you can fake it to make it. It is a true essence of who you are. And as leaders, fundamentally, that's our role, is to be able to be our authentic self, but then also enable others to be their authentic self and be relevant to them in their journey of professional growth. So it's easy to say to that point, culture is just, there's hundreds of articles that talk about how to build organizational culture and stuff. But what matters to your team and your employees is not going to be what's in the Harvard Business Review article that you just read. It has to relate to your identity as an organization. It has to relate to your identity as a team.
Awesome. So the next question I've got here, it's somewhat generic, but I think some interesting answers could come from it. What is the single most difficult challenge that you face today as a leader or one of the leaders in your organization?
Steve, do you want to start? Since we went this way, we'll go this way now.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I'm private equity owned, and my private equity owners have very lofty expectations and goals. And so sometimes market conditions, right? We've got recessionary conditions and a UAW strike, and that doesn't become part of the discussion with private equity owners, because they're like, and what are you doing about that, and how do we overcome that hurdle? I think our biggest challenge is growth, picking the right spots for our expansion and growth. Talent, is it right? You expand markets, you need ready leaders to go into those markets and ready employees to go into those markets. And so I think all of us have unique challenges, but I think if you boil them all down, at the end of the day, I think they fall into probably one of 5 buckets. We're high growth, and so we help our customers protect their single largest investment. So there's just so many nuances to a complex business, but it's fun because it's transformative. We're doing things much differently than we did a year ago or 5 years ago. I think that continues, but I think the challenges are, hey, how do you grow smart, and how do you keep the right people? How do you keep the team together? How do you infuse new talent as you talk about AI and the wave that's coming, right? How do you find people that are ready to learn and understand and grow with your business and those things? I think those are challenges that we all face.
Ali, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to go away from the corporate because Aaron gave away the business strategy. So he pretty much took my business strategy part of it. So I'm going to go more on the personal level. I think as a leader, this is me being vulnerable, I think imposter syndrome is something that I struggle with. It's a challenge. Pace of change within technology, and then with our space within security, the pace is even faster. Being able to keep up with the needs and being able to be a leader that's contributing to your team, being able to keep up with that pace, I look back every end of the day going, I don't know shit. And I spend the next day building up my confidence only to have, and I have this conversation with everyone, like, you build your confidence, you walk up the hill to confidence, you're like, all right, I got this. And you do the superhero pose that we did yesterday. And then you have a conversation with someone, tangential, something new, and you go, I don't know shit, and you fall crawling down. So I think for me, the challenge has just been, and that's something that is part of being human, right? So we talk about growth mindset, but this idea of being uncomfortable with the information and where you are in your growth journey, right? So for me, that is the challenge that I suffer with. It's just imposter syndrome. Like being able to say, I know, but then in the next minute going, I don't know anything.
I think for me, you put it in the context of my team and what I'm focused on, is around awareness. And so there's a number of things from a cybersecurity perspective that I would tie that into being aware of the evolving threats that are out there and changing. But probably even more than that, from an awareness perspective, is the pace of change and how the business is transforming right before your eyes, and how they're leveraging technology and some of the new capabilities, and just being aware of what they're doing. Because if we're aware, we can protect. And if we're not aware of that, then you hope that the controls that you've put in place are going to protect you, but they probably aren't. Because, again, with that pace of technological change and digital capabilities that are out there, and the adoption rate that an enterprise organization is doing, if you're not aware of what they're implementing, it's quite a daunting task. So we spend a lot of time trying to stay connected to the business community, whether that's through IT counterparts or even getting involved right with different lines of business and just listening for how they're using technology and trying to become aware so that we can apply the right controls and so forth.
Spoken like a true CISO with the threats. Well, with Rocket Companies, there's no, it's no hidden secret that Rocket Mortgage is the biggest ship in our fleet, and we all know that rates are not great right now. So it's been an interesting year and a half for us, and we've shrunk as a company when you look at the size of the people and what that does to people. Everyone reacts differently. So you got a lot of fear, and some people want to go hide under a rock. Some people want to go elsewhere, and some people want to be empowered and do other things, and those are the people that I'm trying to bring out and do that. So the toughest thing right now is creating and innovating when there's this fear within the company, and trying to get people to realize that actually innovating is the most important thing right now, and empowering them and finding the funds to do that, to be able to help people do that and make sure that people have interest in it, because there's some people within the company that are like, well, we don't want to spend our energy there. No, it's really important we spend our energy there, and that's what we as leaders have to be able to sell and help people understand. So that's the biggest hurdle right now, is being able to innovate and empower during this economic time.
For starters, there were 1,001 odds that Ali would swear before me. So for anyone that knows me, yeah. I'll just say for ourselves, I'll cheat and I'll say two different things. One is just the pace of technology change. You know, it seems like there's a new technology a week, and our engineers are constantly studying new technologies, new vendors. When that just expands and expands and expands, and organizations come to us saying, well, what do you think about these guys? Well, we only heard about them last week, so I'm not sure yet. So it's difficult. I can only fathom what people that are not in our position are struggling with, because we're supposedly the experts, and even we can struggle with it. The second one for us is just being a growing organization, just resource allocation. Where are you going to put your investments? So we've been growing year over year for a long time, and I look out and it's like, do we need another engineer? Do we need another salesperson? Do we need a leader? And I'm always conscious of where we're putting those investments, and that's difficult to do when you're a small company. So, this next one, not sure how many folks have read The Phoenix Project. We've got C3 Book Club this year, so that's one our whole organization tackled. And the CISO gets a bad rap because security is often seen as a burden or a barrier. So how do you balance the needs of security in your organization with the productivity demands and business goals?
I feel like you should start with that one, Craig.
Yeah, I can start. I actually read the Phoenix Project years ago, and was able to take a lot of arrows after that. But for me, from a CISO or cybersecurity perspective, it's about risk management. And so having a robust risk management process where you're able to assess risk in the context of business and really be able to bring risk to the right decision makers, and be sure that it's not a cybersecurity decision, it's a business decision. And in many respects, you're reporting what the cybersecurity risk is, but it's for them to be able to respond to. And I think that's critical for a successful cybersecurity program, a CISO, to have engagement of being a consultant, an ability to bring risk for people to be able to respond to. So really getting away from the Department of No, if you will. And I'll talk about ours just a little bit here. So we implemented a risk management program several years ago now, and a couple of the key elements in there that I found to be great is when you assess risk. I mean, we all probably know the formula there, probability and impact ultimately ends up being the risk level. But determining who is the right authoritative source to be able to accept the risk is really important. And so for us, as an example, our critical risks have to be approved by our chief executive officer. Our high risks would be the VP, so those that report to the CEO, and so on and so forth down the list. And that works really well for us and gets the right people engaged and gets them visibility to the risks, and then they're able to make decisions based on that.
I was going to add, you covered pretty much most of the bases. One thing I was going to add was the power of the word "and." So one of the things that we try and do to change that mindset of the Department of No is when an initiative comes in, one of our functions is risk assessment, right? So we provide the business with the risk profile so they can make the logical decision whether it's the right business decision or not. But then also coming up with a recommendation on how to do that in a manner that mutually finds us achieving the business value but doing it securely. So it becomes less of a conversation of don't do this because this is the risk. It becomes a conversation of let's do this and guess what? Implement these other things and we achieve that same outcome. So the power of "and" is one thing. The other thing is my word of the month, so I need to add that book to my reading library. But recently, I've been following this professor from the Tuck School of Business, but he calls this thing called adoption chain. I think it's a powerful word. It's self-explanatory. It's something we were using, but we didn't have a vocabulary to tie it to. But like a lot of the things that from a security perspective we try and implement have to be adopted by the business or by another function. Fundamentally, the concept is assess who your different stakeholders to get that adopted are and ensure no one has a negative experience tied to that. A single negative experience will lead to failure. So I think the power of and, assessing and evaluating your adoption chain are two things that we are looking to do more of within Amway to kind of change that philosophy of, or that mindset, or that label of Department of No.
We talk about cybersecurity a lot with our teams regularly, right? And so my CEO has a security first mindset. So I've got line of business leaders that see tool du jour in the Wall Street Journal and every trade magazine, and they come in and they lay it on the table. The first question my CEO will ask is, well, what did Steve think about that? And often it's, well, I didn't talk to him yet because I was trying to secure funding. And he says, once I've got his buy-in, we'll talk about funding. And so we have a different culture. We've had a cybersecurity incident when it preceded my time with the company, but there is an organizational hangover, if you will, from an incident that they're risk averse. And so if my chief marketing officer wants to feed customer data to a marketing partner, we just want to have a conversation with the marketing partner. We want to understand how the data is going to be consumed, stored, and disposed of. And so it's not, I don't want to say it's the Department of No, but there are a lot of line of business leaders in my world that hear no because the idea they have just is half-baked and it's not secure. And all I say to my team pretty regularly is if you pay attention to any of these breaches that have happened, big hospital group here in Michigan, I won't mention the name, just announced they had an incident where patient, I don't want to have to explain to my board or anyone why customer data was compromised. So we talk about that a lot to our teams in terms of if you're on the help desk and you answer the phone and somebody's saying, you know, I need my password reset. Nope, we're not doing that over the phone, right? So we've just created our own controls, low budget controls, but it's effective for us because it's a scenario where the business knows the pain of losing 8 days because of a ransomware attack. I get to enjoy that history because they're very risk averse. And so my CEO is aligned that, hey, I'm not going to block something if it checks boxes. Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't check the requisite boxes, let's talk to that partner about how we do that. But sometimes it does lend to no, and that's okay too. We've picked different partners because of a security scorecard where one just didn't have the right controls on their end, and all I do is articulate the risk to my board and my business, but I've got a CEO who's very quick to say, yeah, that doesn't make sense right now. Doesn't make sense for us to do that.
You know what this makes me think of? I had to do a whole bunch of homework for this conference. I was reading something and said 37% of organizations either had a flat or declining security budget. And I was like, oh, goodness, I wouldn't have thought that. Of the 63% that are remaining that actually did have increasing budgets, 80% of them, the main reason why was a significant breach or a significant disruption. It feels so reactive. You know, it feels like, oh my gosh, our house burned down. We got to buy 4 times better fire insurance next time. We got to buy 17 fire extinguishers for each room instead of just, I don't know, being a bit more proactive. But I don't know, just a quick point. Stacy, please.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's where it starts, right? Like we in technology, we inherently understand it and we get it. And sometimes we assume that others. So I think really helping explain the why and, you know, what's in it for me. I think everybody probably knows someone, if not themselves, that have had that happen to themselves with having their credit stolen, their identity stolen, or whatever. And then helping them understand in these stories with these companies on how it's happened to them and what it would mean to the company that they work for if that were to happen. That's a big piece of it. Something we've done is we all know that the easiest breach is the person, right? It's always the humans. And so we've actually, it's kind of gamifying it, where we actually will send out things, try to catch people, in the mix of like trying to give out information, like clicking that link that they shouldn't or whatever, and then if they don't, and you actually report it, you get a, hey, congratulations, and now all the leaders throughout the whole organization can get a report of like how their team is doing on that, so now they can compete with other teams and say, hey, like, we're doing really good, or oh, we missed a couple, let's make sure we're paying more attention, and it makes it where it's front of mind for all of us, and doing that all the time. So I think that's the key piece.
All right. So you can take this one in a couple different angles, but I'll tell you what, with Ali, I'm going to start with Ali on this one because I loved, you gave a very human response a couple minutes ago, so I want to start with you on this one. So we're all human. We've all made mistakes. I'd love to know about a significant blunder that you've made in your career and what you've learned about it. I have an awesome one. I can't wait to go, but I'm going to wait till the end.
First of all, it would be in my prior role. So for context, I'm a technology leader first. I took over a security role about recently. In my prior role, I had the eye-opening things that I would have, looking back, I'm like, how did I miss that? I was helping implement a solution. We had a successful deployment of it across Europe. I was riding high from the perspective of success. We had a playbook defined, took that playbook, went to Asia, and let's just say I did not factor the cultural sensitivity, cultural dynamics that come into taking an implementation. And we failed. It was supposed to be a 6-month implementation. 6 months into it, we decided we needed to reset and start over. But it was a great learning opportunity from the perspective of, what it takes to customize or personalize an implementation, and the fact that we sometimes in a national, if you're just a US based, kind of assume everyone's like us, everyone can understand things the same way. When you go to Europe, very similar. Go to the east side of the world, completely different. So for me, that was an eye-opening failure, but I prefer to use the word learning rather than failure because failure just has a bad connotation. So fundamentally, I tell my team, like, I'm learning every day, which means I'm failing every day. But it's those micro failures that are making me who I am today. So to call out a very specific one, I think it was that one. I think I'm not gonna put the dollar amounts in case my upline or someone else is here. But we lost a lot of money in that implementation, but that also speaks to the power of our corporation, where I'm still here, I still progressed in my career. They saw that as a development opportunity for me to go through that experience, have that learning, to be able to now take that to my team subsequently and educate them on that.
Thank you, Ali. Steve, go ahead.
I make mistakes regularly. This
A
year,
significant one.
This
Come on
year.
now, you're not snaking out of this one.
This year, we hired a wrong partner to do a mobile app development project, and $500,000 into it, I pulled the plug. And I had to explain to my CEO why I pulled the plug. I had to explain to my board why I pulled the plug. And the reality was it could have been a $500,000 loss, or it could have been $1 million loss, or a $1.5 million loss if we kept going. But what I commonly say to people is you develop a very powerful gut instinct after years of doing what you do. And we would set up demos of where the development team was, and it was really a fancy presentation. And we said, give us the code, we want to play with what you've built. And that's when it kind of went sideways. And so $500,000 later, lawyers involved, lawsuit, right? Unscathed with my board of directors, because what they said is, thank you. But more importantly, what did we learn from this? Because what I learned from it is you can go find the shiniest partner in a market, and you may be the smallest fish in their pond, where you don't get their A team or their B team, or maybe even the C team. And so, yeah, Matthew, I could sit here and go year by year of pretty big, because they happen, right? We fail fast. This probably wasn't as fast as we should have failed at it, but I guess the lesson is it's you're going to make mistakes. Use them as learning opportunities. Make sure your teams are educated on the why and the how. Should my project manager maybe have seen it before, maybe my development lead? Yeah, I'm going to take responsibility for it because I sat in those reviews. And it took us a little long to figure out that we're kind of looking at the same thing week after week after week. And so my message to people is, hey, you're a blue chip, really fancy nameplate company. That's not always your best partner because, again, you're going to become a very small fish in their pond. And we got wrapped up in, hey, we do this for General Motors, and it was, my leadership team was like, wow, this is like, but it wasn't. And so costly, unscathed, picked a new partner that probably was the right partner to begin with, and off we went. And so this notion of perfection, my best example, if you look at Miguel Cabrera, just retired, and his lifetime batting average was 300. There's a lot of failure in his career, but at the end of the day, he's going to go down as one of the greatest hitters of my era, right? So you just have to take all that into consideration and say, yes, there's failure, but in the grand scheme of things, on balance, if you have more wins than losses, you'll be fine.
I would like to add one more thing to that statement, tying it back to culture. As leaders, to talk about that with our teams is critical.
Absolutely.
Not celebrating failures, but basically talking about why we made that decision, and it's the right business decision to make, gives them the latitude to experiment and take risks.
Yep.
So just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, we have in our business where, like the IT team, we create safe zones where they can go play. I don't want to crash in production, but I'll crash in a test bed all day long. So all I say to my team is, we're going to make mistakes, but we have to minimize the blast zone because the mistake can't take the business out. It might, but there'll be a lot more questions than if we don't. And so failure is part of our everyday discussion because it's critical to what we do. If we looked at how all 4 of our companies do IT, it's completely different, but they're all successful. So there's no real one right way or wrong way to do anything that we do. And I think that's what you have to convey to your teams because as you're building your next generation of leaders, they can't be afraid of failure. They can't because it's going to happen. And now you have people walking around going, oh, Steve, he didn't smile today. He's probably mad. No, listen, let's just have the discussion. Very candid. I say to my team all the time, we're going to do great things. We're going to do bad things. We're going to talk about all of them because that's how people learn.
Stacy?
Yeah, I think 2 quick things. Ali, really good point. Like, you have to share when these things happen so others know, like, you're not that perfect person because none of us are. And one of my favorite quotes, you talk about how you had to pull the plug. One of my favorite quotes from one of our senior leaders is, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And that's what it is, right? For me, mine was assuming that, like, we're all salesmen. People say you don't want to be, but we are. And if you're a leader, informal or formal, or you're a parent, you're a salesperson. I don't care what you say. And so I sold a high price project for us to do, multi-year, to our senior leadership. And when I did that, I got my immediate peers involved, and I got my senior leadership to agree. And so I thought, good, we're going. No, because it was a multi-year project, I had people that became non-believers along the way as we pivot and turned, and I just kept assuming everyone was still on board, and that really set us up for failure. So Anne ended up being a huge pivot in the project where I ended up having to take a step back. Someone else was put in charge. They ended up spending more money, where a year later we had to end up pulling back, same situation, legal situation and all. And so it was messy. So my biggest thing was, it's kind of like if you're in real estate, they always say you never put the sold sign up until actually you close on the house. Now, purchase agreement is not enough because things can go bad at closing. Well, I put that sold sign up as soon as they said yes originally, and you can't do that. You got to make sure you follow and keep selling it, keep making sure you have believers and empowering people.
I feel like that's almost like we were talking about culture earlier, like it's a repetition. It's something you're doing consistently. And even if it is a big plan that you get an okay on, I can see you doing this, okay, this is once a quarter, this is what's happening, this is where we are, this is some of the mini failures, some of the mini successes, and selling it the whole way. Makes sense. Craig?
Yeah, just a couple things to talk about. So one would be as an individual contributor. So years and years ago, I was a developer. That was my early career, and at the same company. So even though I made a huge mistake, I'm still here today. But it wasn't uncommon at the time as a developer to have different environments open on your workstation, and I had production environment open, development, and database environments, and I thought I was truncating a table in the development environment, happened to truncate an entire pricing table in production, and it was kind of near the end of the day, packed up my stuff, headed home, and started getting phone calls shortly thereafter. I realized what I did and had to undo all of that. But the learning for me there was that, nobody came down on me, wanted to hold me accountable, and it really, you're hearing culture a lot, but having a blame-free culture is super important. And I take that with me today. People make mistakes on my team, and I'm never calling them out, making them feel bad about it or holding them accountable. The big thing is how they respond to it, and did they learn from it and not make that mistake again, hopefully. From a leadership perspective, though, the one thing I want to talk about, and again, goes back to culture, I'd say early on in my leadership career, I was really uneasy with having open positions out there, and I was working hard to fill positions and was not as good about scrutinizing who was going to be on the team as I am today. So what I realized along the way through some unfortunate hires and mistakes back then without really understanding the team mix and how that person was going to interact with the team and how negative it was for the team, now, if I fast forward ahead, nothing's more important than having the right team members on the team to maintain a high-performing team, and we're hyper-focused on ensuring that. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen from time to time, but that would be a mistake of the past, and I would say a pretty significant learning.
You stole mine, Craig, so thanks. So I think about, sometimes I equate our folks to SEAL Team 6 members, and I think to myself, like, every once in a while we put, a weekend warrior in with a SEAL team, and then they're like, are we still a SEAL team? And all of a sudden people are like, this is the right place for me? So I think about that level of talent. You want to insulate your talent with other talent. And I think when you put the wrong person in the wrong place, you have a problem in that one person, but you have other people that are like, is that acceptable behavior? And everyone's looking at you. And I think it's a matter of getting those great people in the organization and unfortunately moving some of the wrong pieces out over time as well. But doing that one relatively fast.
You don't want to invite a competent jerk into the team.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never had those before. So I'd love to hear from all of you about your leadership style. If you had to describe your leadership style to someone that you're hiring, to a board member, to another C-level, what would you say? How would you describe yourself? And I'll tell you what, throw it right back over to you.
Let's see, I would say I empower. So I love developing other people. So what I try to do is try to help them, show them the way, and then remember to take a step back. So far from micromanaging, I'm one that will be there. I'll help knock down hurdles. When you go around a room and you introduce yourself, a lot of people say, what do you do? My initial response is usually that I knock down hurdles. And that's my own job. And so that's kind of what I tell people is, hey, it's not about me knowing more, it's not about me doing the work, it's about empowering other people to do the work. And I'm an executor by nature, so I'm very transparent. I'll tell people, like, okay, I'm not getting it, help me. I'll tell people to draw me cartoon diagrams, to help me visualize. I said I'm a visual learner. So that's really, it's just empowering others is my style.
Okay, Craig?
Yeah, for me it'd be collaborative. I think that'd be the right word. And I'll use an example. So every, 12 to 18 months or so, we refresh what we call our statements of direction. So where do we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? it'd be easy for me to go in the dark room, come out of my office or what have you, hold up the statements of direction, say this is where we're heading, and start people down that path. And this is foundational for us. We build everything on top of these. But what I try to do, and have found to be empowering, I think, for people, but just so many other benefits as well, is bring not only my leadership team into that conversation, but also individual contributors for their respective domains, really understand from their perspective, what are they facing, where do they think we need to go. We have a good dialogue about it. Ultimately, we end up with a great set of statements of direction, and probably the biggest thing about that is it creates buy-in as well. So we can be really adaptable and make change happen, and everybody's bought in because they all participated in the process. It doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is going to get into the statements of direction and happen, but we have a good dialogue about it and understand different perspectives.
Ali?
All right. I think leadership style is something that keeps evolving. So I don't necessarily say I have one specific, but if I was to pick a word, I'll probably say partner and leading by example are two things that I would say here and now are two words that resonate with me when someone says, what is my style? From a partner perspective, it's back to understanding who your team members are. Not only that, understanding who your stakeholders are, to be able to personalize the message from a communication perspective for that audience. And I think, again, it's one of those buzzwords of lead by example, but fundamentally, you can't ask your team members to do something if you yourselves aren't going to act upon it. So you have to be that change. You have to lead by that example. So from a leadership style perspective, I'd probably say, a partner and leading by example would probably be my style here and now.
Steve?
I'm pretty fortunate because we do 360-degree reviews, and so my team tells me what they think that is. And my last review with my team, they just said that I lead by example. I'm very candid, meaning I don't try to filter a message. We talk a lot about company performance, and it's like, hey, this is where we're at. We're off plan here, right? My team understands those business metrics, and one of the things that they've said is they can ask me anything, and they know I'm not managing a message. I'm just going to be candid and blunt. I'm focused on their growth and development. But I think as leaders, too, the other challenge we have is we create rules and then sometimes don't want to live by them. And the great example, and I kind of came up earlier with culture, your culture is exposed the moment one of your employees needs something and your reaction to it. So I have an employee who works for me on my development team. She's pregnant. We found out she was Ubering to work every day because she didn't feel comfortable driving because she had a fainting spell early in her pregnancy. Well, our company policy is you don't get to work from home. And I went to my boss and I said, I have a real problem with her getting in a car with a stranger twice a day, every day that we're at work, to come to work. And he said, she can work from home. And I only found that out. She never said a word about it, but we had an employee event and she won a cooler. So she said, can somebody help me carry the cooler to the cab? And I thought it was a typo in Teams and said, I thought she meant car. So I said, Ash, I'd be happy to carry the cooler down. And I said, is this your husband? Thinking I'd meet her husband. No, it's my Uber driver. Uber driver? So she explained this whole story to me, and I was like, wow. We created a rule that said, thou shalt. And I could have said, nope, keep Ubering. But I think as you're tested by your employees in those moments to say, is it really important that I'm here? Is it really important that I spend $60 a day in an Uber? So I think we're tested regularly with those things, and we get an opportunity to show our teams who we really are in those incidents. And I think so I'm blessed because my teams give me that very candid feedback. I get it from my peers, I get it from my boss, I get it from the CEO and the board. Right? My board said, what they love about me is if they ask a question, I'm going to give them a straight. Even if it's not the answer they wanted, they don't ever second guess where I'm coming from. Because to me, that's reputation. And I'm not going to manipulate or sugarcoat or tell them what they want to hear. Because, look, if they ask the right questions and push the right buttons, they're going to find out anyway. Why hide it? And that's one of the things that I kind of pride myself on with my team.
I'll just say for myself, it's consistency in how I speak to everyone. So if you're another leader or you just came on as a low-level marketing person, you're going to get the same me, same language, same personality. Might swear a little bit too much. But I'm the same person all the time. So you're going to get one version of me all the time. So I think that's what mine is. The last one I've got here. How do you guide the careers of high performers? So what are you doing with those folks to guide them, ensure they're not going to a competitor, that they're with your team for a long time?
That gets to really knowing your team members and knowing where their passions are and what they want. You know, there are some people that they might want to learn a new skill, but they haven't actually brought it up. Or sometimes just knowing them and saying, hey, have you thought about this? And they haven't actually thought about it, and it might be something. So, you know, there's a couple thoughts there. One is, we as leaders have a tendency to spend our energy on low-level performers and not on the high level. So we have to make sure that we're spending more energy on the high performers.
That's so hard to do.
It's
'cause
so hard
you
to
want to
do.
go to the problem children, and those are the things that attract your attention naturally.
Yes, yeah. And that's how you lose the high performers, because they're not getting the attention, they're not getting the development that they deserve. What I try to do is help them with different skills, but also different experiences. So we are fortunate where we're a sister, so we're a whole family of companies. So if I can give them some exposure in another sister company or across all the companies, like that's more experience than what they would have. So it's like, think about bigger and broader is what I try to do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think from a leadership perspective, it's about creating opportunities. But going back to what Stacy's saying is know the high potentials and what they really want, because high potential or high performing employees, they're going to be good at a lot of different things. And if you create opportunities down a pathway that doesn't line up with their aspirations, then you've got a challenge and perhaps they're going to end up leave. So for example, you may have an architect that just happens to be really good at leading people. Well, they may not want to be a people leader at some point, and so don't create opportunities where you put them in that position, and that starts with understanding them. But overall, from a leadership perspective, it's about creating the opportunities to stretch them in areas that they want to go, and also, I guess one thing I don't want to miss as a leader also is to be able to understand when they're overextending themselves, because oftentimes when you offer up an opportunity that may be a stretch assignment or something else, it can be beyond their day-to-day work, or maybe it ends up being a scenario where they end up putting a little bit more time in. High potential people often just pour themselves into it. They'll work extra hours. They'll miss, important events with their family or what have you. You've got to be tuned into that and make sure that they aren't doing that, because they're going to end up in a burnout, type situation, and you can do something about it as a leader.
Yeah, I was going to build on that, but basically, as a high performer, those are your go-getters, so they have a hard time saying no. To that point, their plate fills up because they want to continue to achieve, but as a leader, you need to be aware of what that capacity is. Having that conversation with that team member to understand what their personal why is. And as an organization, we always go towards the monetary, give them a bump. But realistically, and I was reading a study about like a raise is a raise for about 2 months in, and then it's a salary was kind of the quote. But point being, the impact of the salary impacts motivation for a shorter period of time. To your point, Stacy, the experiences, the personal growth investments that they go through are a much more lasting and sustaining motivator than just a monetary one-time thing. So I would kind of second what you guys have said. Just understand who your people are, what makes them tick, because for everyone, it's a different thing. Second, be aware of capacity. Your high performers are actually the ones that will take on the world for you, but you need to be, as leader, aware of what their capacity is, so you're not setting them up for failure as a result of putting too much on their plate.
Yeah, I think it's balance, right? My high performers, you get out of their way, you help them grow, you identify what's in their blind spot that they may not see. My architect gets to present to my leadership team pretty regularly. He said, I'm not comfortable with that. And I said, well, how do we get you comfortable with that? And he goes, I need a little bit more exposure. So we had him present to the team a bit, and we got a little bit more comfortable. I said, okay, we're going to present to the leadership team now. And he said, I'm pretty nervous. And I said, but you know all of them, and you know the content. So what are you nervous about? And he said, I'm nervous because I've never really done it in front of the leadership team. And I said, that's a safe space, because even if you make a mistake in front of that team, they're still going to appreciate the contribution. And it's not going to be a, oh, well, what happened? It's going to be a, okay, his knees knocked during the entire presentation because he was nervous. But that's how you learn. You grow through those experiences and get better at it. I could ignore that as a leader and say, well, just continue to architect and right? No, but I want him to grow. He's told me he wants to be a CIO, and I'm saying, these are the skills you need. So he's in the RISE program with Sim Detroit to train leaders how to be better leaders. Invest in your people. Put them in the right situation. I'm probably not the best mentor for him, but we partnered him with a very good one, and he will learn through that experience. And so I think those are the key thing with your high performers. Also watch what you do with low performers. And I think that's the other key. If you're spending a lot of time with low performers, exit them. Get them out of the mix, because all the rest of your team is watching your behavior with somebody who might not be the best person for the role.
That's a really good point when you talk about it might not be opportunities within your area, but giving them exposure to other people within your own network that they can learn from, because sometimes they don't learn the best from you or from people within your organization, and that can be within the community, your network, maybe from different partners that you're working with, stuff like that. So I think just expanding beyond that's a really good point.
What's funny too is I think to myself, when we have someone that isn't the right fit and they're a low performer, and sometimes you're like, I'm not sure if should we keep them on, what should we do? And then I think to myself sometimes, am I keeping this person from what they're supposed to be doing? I think about it like that, because they may be a low performer in our organization, in a specific job function, but they're meant to do something else. And it's like, this sounds, I don't know if it sounds bad or weird, but like, I want to free them to do the thing they're supposed to be, the thing they're supposed to do. And it makes me feel a bit better when it's like, yes, because this isn't the right place for them.
I think it's important to have that conversation with the low performer. Unfiltered, right? Just say, hey, let's have a discussion about where you want to go and where you want to be. Because I think if you have that candid conversation with somebody who's not performing well, they're going to realize very quickly that they're probably not in the right role. And then it doesn't become messy, because then it's, well, how can I help you bridge to something that you could be more successful at? It might not be here, but that doesn't mean I'm focusing on the problem and not the person. It's not an indictment on the person. It's just, it's not the right fit for the puzzle. To your SEAL Team 6 example earlier, if you've got a team that's well-oiled and performing, you drop somebody new in, they've got a ramp-up period of time. But after that ramp-up period, if they're not part of SEAL Team 6, the rest of that team's going to be looking at you as the leader to say, what are you going to do to address that? And I think that's more of a risk for your high performers, being passive on somebody who's not carrying their weight. And again, I think from just a direct, candid, unfiltered approach, have those discussions. Because I've always found that people are human. Usually if you say to somebody, hey, I think you're struggling in this role, they're going to say, oh thank you for noticing, because I have been and I didn't know how to bring it up. And my wife would kill me if she knew I was struggling. And it's like, we're all human. How do we fix this? How do we help you? Right? I've given employees in my organization DISC assessments, and we've brought HR in. Hey, how can we help them? How are they wired? How can we help them do things differently? I've had to fire people who've come back a few years later and said, thank you. Thank you. Because I wouldn't do it myself, but the organization made the move, and you treated me fairly, and you were, right? We've all been in that situation, right? We want candid feedback about our growth and what the opportunity, and if they don't exist, there's nothing value added in sugarcoating that, or just recognize it and put a plan together.
Last thing I'll throw out there is, for our organization, I like this idea that our leaders are being very, very proactive. We're not even waiting for that feedback, or we're not waiting for them to initiate the conversation. I think our organization, at least for me, I'll go to people almost to a fault and say, is this what you want to do? what else do you want to do? Like, I almost want to pull this from them instead of saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know you wanted to leave and do something else. Like, I want to be so proactive and find out when it's in the very formation stages. Like, I'm thinking about this thing out here. It's like, well, tell me about that. Like, why does it get you out of bed in the morning? Like, why is that something that you want to pivot to? So, but all right, that's all the time we have. So, Stacy, Craig, Ali, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.